Hello, good afternoon. It's Wednesday, reading time with Miss Amanda. This month we have been reading a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The book is written by Richard Bash. Photographs are by Russell Muson. This month we've been reading about a dove named Jonathan. Jonathan wanted to learn to fly. His dream was flying like a bird. That was Jonathan's dream. Last week we ended the story with Jonathan Seagull cast out of the seagull community because he decided to learn to fly instead of doing what seagulls do. What seagulls was born to do was to search for food, eat, so they can live a long life. After being cast out, Jonathan lived alone for many years, learning, practicing new skills of flying, and enjoying his new freedom. Jonathan met an elder seagull named Cheyenne. Cheyenne had more skills in flying than any seagull that ever lived. Cheyenne taught Jonathan many new skills in flying with speed. Cheyenne told Jonathan that he has learned all there were to learn on the level that he was on, and that it was time for him to move on to another school of learning. So Jonathan said, okay. He was ready to learn more. Cheyenne said his goodbyes and he flew away. As time went on, Jonathan met an instructor named Sullivan. Sullivan told Jonathan what a fast learner he was, that he had less fear of learning than any seagull that he have ever seen in 10,000 years. Jonathan was not an ordinary seagull. Now it was time for Jonathan to learn to fly with time. Time to be perfect. Seagull Fletcher was a new seagull that Jonathan met while he began the new school. Fletcher wanted to learn to fly with level flight. He wanted to learn to fly like Jonathan. Jonathan himself decided that he wanted to learn all the levels of flying that he can, so that he can go back to Earth where the other seagulls were and to teach them how to fly. Teach them how to fly. And that's a lot of a good living in learning to fly. And all that good living was called freedom. That is the way the story ended last week, with Jonathan wanting to learn all the skills he can learn so that he can go back to Earth, find his friends at shore, and to teach them how to fly. Here is Jonathan and Fletcher as they flying through the air, going to the next school of learning on a whole nother level. Jonathan circled slowly over the fir cliffs, watching the rough young Fletcher girl was very nearly a perfect flight student. He was strong and light and quick in the air, but far and away more important, He had a blazing dive to learn to fly. Here he came this minute, blurred gray, sharp roaring out of a dive, flashing 150 miles per hour past his instructor. He pulled abruptly into another try at a 16-point vertical slow roll, calling the points out loud. 8, 9, 10. See, Jonathan, I'm running out of airspeed. 11. But bless it, I just can't make 13. These last 3 points without 14. Oh, man. I can't make it. Excuse me. Flesh, whip stall at the top, was all the worse for the rage and fury of failing. He fell backwards, tumbling, slamming savagely into an inverted spin, and recovered at last, panting 100 feet below his instructor level. You're wasting your time with me, Jonathan. I'm too dumb. I'm too stupid. I try and try, but I never get it. Jonathan Seagull looked down at him and nodded. You'll never get it, for sure, as long as you make that pull-up so hard. Fletcher, you lost 4 miles an hour in the entry. You have to be smooth, firm, but smooth. Remember that. He dropped down to the level of the young girl. Let's try it together now. Information, and pay attention to this pull-up. It's a smooth and easy entry, Jonathan said. By the end of 3 months, Jonathan had 6 other students, outcasts, all yet curious about the strange new idea of flight for the joy of flying. Still, it was easier for them to practice high performance than it was to understand the reason behind it. Each of us is the truth and ideal of the great girl, an unlimited ideal of freedom. Jonathan would say in the evening on the beach, and precision flying is a step toward expressing our real nature. Everything that limits us, we have to put it aside. That's why all the high-speed practice and low-speed and aerobastic and his students will be asleep, exhausted from the day's flying. They liked it, the practice, but it was fast and exciting, and they felt hungry for the learning that grew with every lesson. But not one of them, not even Fletcher Gov, have come to believe that the flight of ideals could possibly be as real as the flight of wind and feathers. Your whole body, from wingtip to wingtip, Jonathan would say. Other times, it's nothing more than your thought itself in a form you can see. Break the chains of your thoughts, and you break the chains of your body too. But no matter how he said it, it sounded like pleasant fiction. They needed more to sleep. It was only a month later that Jonathan said the time had come to return to the flock. We are not ready, said Henry. We are not welcome. We are outcasts. We can't force ourselves to go where we are not wanted, can we? We are free to go where we wish to be, said Jonathan. They left from the sand and turned east toward the home ground of the flock. There was brief anguish among his students, for it is the law of the flock that outcasts never returns, and the law have not been broken once in 10,000 years. The law say, Jonathan said, go. The law says stay, but Jonathan keeps saying go. And it by now, he was a mile across the water. If they waited much longer, he would reach a hostile flock alone. Well, we don't have to obey the law, or do we? Not a part of the flock, do we? Fletcher said, rather self-conscious. Besides, if there's a fight, we'll be a lot more help there than here. And so they flew in from the west that morning. 8 of them, 8 outcasts joined together, and they was flying back to the flock. 8 of them in a double diamond formation, wingtips almost overlapping. They came across the flock Counseling Beach at 135 miles per hour. Jonathan in the lead, Fletcher smoothly at his right wing, Henry, Calvin struggling gamely at the left. Then the whole formation rose slowly to the right as one bird, level to inverted 2. Level, the wind whispering over them all. In the flock was cut off as though the formation was a giant knife, and 8,000 gov eyes watched without a single blink. One by one, each of the 8 birds pulled sharply upward into a full loop and flew all the way around to the dead slow stand up, landing on the sand. Then, as though this sort of thing happens every day, Jonathan Seagull began his flight. To begin with, he said with a weary smile, "You was all a bit late on the join up." It went like lightning through the flock. Those birds are outcasts, and they have returned, and that can't happen. Fletcher's prediction of battle meddled in the flock confusion. Well, sure, okay, they are outcasts, said some of the younger girls. But hey, man, where did they learn to fly like that? It took almost an hour for the word of the elders to pass through the flock. Ignore them, the elders were screaming. The girls will speak to an outcast. The God that speaks to outcast is himself will be an outcast. The law of the flock. Great Feather's backs was turned upon Jonathan from that moment onward, but he didn't appear to notice. He held his practice section directly over the Counselor Beach, and for the first time began pressing his students to the limit of their abilities. Martin Gov He shot it across the sky. You say you know low speed flying? You know nothing till you prove it. So fly. So quiet, little Martin William Seagull. Startled to caught under his instructor's fire. Surprised himself and began a wizard of low speed. In the lightest breeze, he could curve his feathers to lift himself without a single flap of wind. From sand to cloud and down again. Look at them how they're flying. Look at them. Look at them fly. Isn't they beautiful? All the outcasts are flying in the darkness over Counselor Beach. And all the seagulls on shore, they was amazed on how those outcasts was flying. Fletcher Seagull, who loved acrobats like no one else, conquered his 16-point vertical slow roll, and the next day topped it off with a triple cartwheel, his feathers flashing white sunlight to a beach from which more than one fugitive eye watched. Every seagull was watching. Every hour, Jonathan was there at the side of each of his students, demonstrating, suggesting, pressuring, guiding. He flew with them through night and cloud and storm for the sport of it, while the flock huddled miserably on the ground. When the flying was done, the students relaxed in the sand, and in time, they listened more closely to Jonathan. He had some crazy ideas that they couldn't understand. But then he had some good ones too that they could understand. Gradually in the night, another circle formed around the circle of students. A circle of curious girls listened in the darkness for hours on end, not wishing to see or be seen or one another, fading away from daybreak. It was a month after the return that the first girl of the flock crossed the line and asked to learn how to fly. In his asking, Terence Logov became a condemned bird, labeled outcast, and the eighth of Jonathan's students. The next night from the flock came Kirk, wobbling across the sand, dragging his left wing to collapse at Jonathan's feet. "Help me," he said very quietly, speaking in the way that the dying speak. His voice was very weak. But he said, "I want to fly more than anything in this world." This was coming from one of the seagulls. He wanted to fly like he saw the outcast fly. "Come along then," said Jonathan. "Climb with me away from the ground and we will begin." "You don't understand. My wing. I can't move my wing." "Mayor Gov, you have the freedom to be yourself, your true self, here and now, and nothing can stand in your way. It is the law of the great Gov, the law that is." "Are you saying I can fly?" "I say you are free." free to do whatever you want to do. And simple and as quickly as that, Kurt Maynard Gubb spread his wing effortlessly and lifted into the dark night air. The flock was roused from the sleep by his cry, as loud as he could scream it, from 500 feet up. I can fly! I can fly! By sunrise, there was nearly 1,000 birds standing outside the circle of students looking curious at Maynard. They didn't care whether they were seen or not. They listened, trying to understand Jonathan Seagull. He spoke of very simple things, that it is right for a gull to fly, that freedom is the very nature of being. But whatever stands against that freedom must be set aside. Be it ritual or superstition or limitation in any form. Set aside came a voice from the multitude, even if it be the law of the flock. The only true law is that which leads to freedom. Jonathan said, there is no other. How do you expect us to fly as you fly? Came another voice. You are special and gifted and divine above other birds. Look at Fletcher Lowell, Charles Rowland, Judy Lee. Are they also special and gifted and divine? No more than you are. No more than I am. The only difference, the very only one, is that they have begun to understand what they really are and have begun to practice. That is the only difference. Not gifted, not divine, but they practice. His students, save Fletcher, shifted uneasily. They haven't realized that this was what they were doing. The crowd grew larger every day, coming to question, to idolize, to scorn. They are saying in the flock that if you are not the son of the great Gubb himself, Fletcher told Jonathan one morning after advanced speed practice, then you are 1,000 years ahead of your time. Jonathan sighed. The price of being misunderstood, he thought. They call you devil, or they call you God. What do you think, Fletcher? Are you ahead of our time? A long silence. Well, this kind of flying has always been here to be learned by anybody who wants to discover it. That's got nothing to do with time. We're ahead of the fashion, maybe. Ahead of the way that most gulls fly. That's something, Jonathan said, rolling to a glide and vert for a while. That's not half as bad as being ahead of our time. It happened just a week later. Fletcher was demonstrating the elements of high-speed flying to a class of new students. He had just pulled out of his dive from 7,000 feet along Great Street, flirting a few inches above the beach when a young bird on his first flight glided directly into his path, calling for his mother. With a tenth of a second to avoid the youngster, Fletcher Seagull snapped hard to the left at something over 200 miles per hour into a cliff of solid granite. It was for him as though the rock was a giant, hard door into another world. A burst of fear and shock and black as he hit, and then he was adrift in a strange sky, forgetting, remembering, forgetting, afraid, and sad and sorrow. Terribly sorry. Here he is, blind. And a new beginner came across his path, causing him to hit a rock. The voice came to him as it had in the first day that he has not met Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The trick, Fletcher, is that we are trying to overcome our limitation in order, patiently, we don't tackle flying through rocks until a little later in this program. Jonathan, also known as the son of the great Gulf, his instructor said dryly, "What are you doing here? The cliff? Haven't I? Didn't I? Didn't I die?" Oh, Flesh, come on. Think. If you are talking to me now, then obviously you didn't die, did you? What you did manage to do was to change your level of consciousness rather abruptly. It's your choice now. You can stay here and learn on this level, which is quite a bit higher than the one you left, by the way, or you can go back and keep working with the flock. The elder was hoping for some kind of disaster, but they startled that you obligate them so well, meaning that Jonathan had guided them so well in his teaching. I want to go back to the flopper cause. I barely begun with the new group. Very well, Fletcher. Remember what we were saying about one body being nothing more than a thought itself? Fletcher shook his head and stretched his wings and opened his eyes at the base of the cliff, in the center of the whole flock assembled. There was a great clamor of squawks and squeals from the crowd. Then first he moved. He lived. He that was dead lives. Touch him with a wingtip. Brought him to life. The son of the great Gulf. Not he. No, he denied. He's a devil that have come back to the flock. There was 4,000 gulls in the crowd, frightened at what had happened, and they cried, "Devil!" Went through them like wind of an ocean storm. Each eye glazed, beaks sharp. They closed in to destroy. Would you feel better if we left, Fletcher? Asked Jonathan. I certainly wouldn't object to it much if we did. Instantly they stood together a half mile away and the flashing beat of the mob closed on empty air. Why is it, Jonathan puzzled, that the harder things in the world to convince a bird that he is free and that he can prove it for himself if he just spend a little more time practicing? Why should that be so hard? Yes, but how did you? Like everything else, Fletcher, practice. That is how I did it, by practicing. By morning, the flock had forgotten instantly, but Fletcher had not. Jonathan remembered what you said a long time ago about loving the flock enough to return to it and help learn. Jonathan said, sure. I don't understand how you manage to love a mob of birds that had just tried to kill you. Oh, Fletch, you don't love that. You don't love hatred and evil. Of course, you have to practice and see the real good, the good in every one of them, and to help them see it is themselves. See it themselves. That's what I mean by love. It runs when you get the night out of it. It's fun when you get the night out of it. I remember a fierce young bird, for instance, named Fletcher Lynn Seagull, his name, just been made outcast, ready to fight the flock to the death, getting a start on the building his own bitter hell out on the far cliff. And here he is today, building his own heavens instead and leading the whole flock in that direction. He is leading the flock into love. Yes, yes, yes. A moment later, Jonathan's body waved in the air, shivering and began to go transparent, meaning he was becoming invisible. Don't let them spread silly rumors about me or make me a god, okay? Fletcher, I'm a seagull. I like to fly. Maybe. Jonathan, poor flesh. Don't believe what your eyes are telling you. All they show is limitations. Look with your understanding. Find out what you already know, and you will see the way to fly. Don't look at what you're looking at. Don't look at the thoughts in your head. But just know that there's no limitations to what you can do. No limitations. No limitations at all to what you are capable of doing. To begin with, he said heavenly, you've got to understand that a seagull is unlimited. Ideal of freedom, an image of the great gull, and your whole body from wingtip to wingtip is nothing more than your thought itself. The young gull looked at him. Hey man, they thought, this doesn't sound like a rule for a loop. Fletcher sighed and started over. And very well, he said, and eyed them quickly. Let's begin with level flight. And saying that, he understood all at once that his friends had quite honestly been no more divine than Fletcher himself. No limits, Jonathan, he thought. Well, then, the time is not distant when I'm going to appear out of thin air on your beach and show you a thing or two about flying. And though he tried to look properly severe for his students, Fletch Seagull suddenly saw them all as they really were, just for a moment. And he more than liked it. He loved it what he saw. No limit, Jonathan, he thought. And he smiled. He raced to learn has begun. His race to learn had begun. Jonathan decided, after learning skill after skills, that he wanted to go back to Earth and be an instructor. He wanted to teach the other gulls how to fly. Jonathan had to teach the gulls how to love one another and how to respect each other. As we, as people, are just like Jonathan Seagull. We must learn to love each other and we must learn to respect each other. Remember, all things are possible if we only believe. We can do all things through Christ Jesus, who strengthens us. All things are possible. There are nothing impossible. There's no limitation to what we can do. There is a Jonathan Livingston Seagull in each and every one of us. Learn to love and learn to respect. And remember, nothing is impossible to do. All things are possible. Just believe. See you next week. And I hope that this story for this month was an enjoyable story for you, that you guys enjoyed the story, and that you learned something from it. If you only learned one thing from this story today, and it should be that all things are possible to those that believe. Practice makes perfect. So continue to love on each other and continue to respect each other. I will see you next week, same time, Wednesday, reading with Miss Amanda. Have a great and beautiful weekend. Enjoy the end of this month, guys. Guess what? This month ends next week. This month will end. And the month of November is on its way in. And we all know Thanksgiving is in November. So look forward to the next month that is coming up. Love you guys. I respect you guys. And have a beautiful, beautiful weekend.